Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody. I'm back with Cassie. Oh, so good to be back in the saddle again. I'm Louise Edington, Cosmic Owl Astrology. I offer readings, consultations, a membership. I write daily on Substack, where I also have another level of membership, the Spiral Weave. And I'm publishing a book. My series book is coming out. I've actually had to push the publication date back for a few technical reasons. It's coming out on August the 12th when we have a most beautiful conjunction in the sky. But signed pre-orders are available now from sacredthreadsimprint.com. And I've had lots of orders. I'm going to be really busy signing. Anyway, Cassie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Biehl. My YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian. My website is empowermentunlimited.net, where I have a talk taking Saturn and Neptune through their times in Aries and their conjunctions throughout history, going back to, believe it or not, the dawn of time. And it identifies themes that you will recognize as being active right now. And it's actually very positive and optimistic.
It is indeed. And there's lots of other optimisms. And I'm laughing at our difference in dress today. So happy Fourth for those that celebrate tomorrow. I'm wearing this because that's what they are. And Cassie's lovely in her red, white, and blue. I might wear red, white, and blue tomorrow. We'll see. So we're going to go through. This is a band I follow, by the way. I don't usually wear t-shirts saying Descol. Anyway, we're going to go through our usual format. I'm sure there's lots of news, and I've got quite a bit to say about the aspects. And then we're just going to talk in general about really the next week. There's a lot going to shift in this next week. So,
All right, so what I like to do is show how astrology is playing out in the news. I understand from people that a lot of people are coming to rely on this as a recap of the news, and I just want to remind everyone that the original point behind it was as an astrological teaching tool. So with that in mind, we are looking at playing out of aspects of disruption and of volatility and an amplification of or a mushrooming of a supersizing of authority, um, illusion, disillusion, but also blocks on all of that. All right, so imposition of supersized walls or blocks or authority, big points in that. Trump cut off trade discussions with Canada because it wanted to tax American tech companies, and Canada backed off and retracted the tax. The Department of Justice announced a program to strip naturalized citizens of their citizenship for civil offenses, not just criminal. The Department of Justice has sued the Los Angeles mayor over the city's sanctuary policies. Trump has suggested deporting Musk. Put a pin in that one.
and
Uh,
and Mand, what's his name? Mamdami, the
oh,
mayoral candidate in New York. He even suggested deporting him too.
The next item on my list,
Oh,
the
sorry.
White House press secretary says the White House is looking into revoking Mandami's citizenship.
Oh,
So, yes,
sorry.
it's there.
Yeah,
Um,
should have known
Trump
she would
has,
have it.
I've been typing and I'm keeping a running
Yeah.
list these days under categories to make it easier. Trump has floated the idea of deporting citizens, including natural born citizens, to foreign prisons with which they have no connection. The Department of Defense has stopped weapons shipments to Ukraine, air defense missiles that were already in place in Poland, and says the funding will also be reduced. The Department of Education has withheld $7 million of funds that were already allocated for after-school programs without any explanation. The Department of Justice is investigating Harvard more for not adequately protecting Jewish students. And as I talked about last week, Trump had demanded that the president of the University of Virginia resign because he didn't like how they were not dismantling the DEI policies. And right after I recorded with Dabney, the president of UVA resigned. All right. Next category, dissolution of walls or blocks. Trump lifted sanctions on a slew of Russian banks. Graham introduced a bill to extend them or for new ones, but the president has discretion on what to do under the terms of this bill, which is supposed to move ahead in the month of July. Uh, the NOAA has released a 2026 budget closing all federally funded weather and climate research labs, including the one responsible for maintaining the nation's top hurricane models. Okay, in the Department of Revelation, so Mercury has been opposite Pluto in Aquarius. I mentioned that this is covering territory that was active right before, at the beginning of November last year, and also at the beginning of January this year. So things connected with the election and Glorioski, a couple of big things. Georgia confirmed the 2024 vote count. An organization called Common Coalition held a She Won outline meeting online. I was in it outlining evidence. There was a 1 in 1 octillion chance of flipping all of the counties red in the swing states. So they've outlined analysis, statistical anomalies, including in Minnesota and Texas, not just the swing states. And they gave a game plan for what to do about it. And if you go to thecommoncoalition.com, there will be a replay available. And there's also a lot of information there about what to do and what the game plan is. All right. Also in this department, Trump dropped his lawsuit against the pollster Ann Seltzer, who had predicted his loss. But in the other direction, Paramount agreed to a $16 million settlement in Trump's lawsuit against it for what he claimed was erroneously editing their interview, the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. And the FCC and the head of Paramount are both saying that this had nothing to do with the FCC's review of a proposed merger that Paramount's trying to get through. A couple of senators have said this is outright bribery. It will be investigated. And an organization called Freedom of the Press Foundation had already said in advance that if there's a settlement, they're going to file a lawsuit on behalf of the shareholders against the head of Paramount and the board. Watch that space.
Mm-hmm.
There's more that's going to come out of this one, because watch what happens when Mercury goes retrograde later in the month. Here's a biggie. In a NATO press conference in the Netherlands, Trump said that he had given Iran permission to bomb U.S. bases in Qatar in retaliation for the airstrikes. They set the time and he got the personnel off base in advance. Let that sink in. Biden revealed in a speech yesterday in San Diego for the Society for Human Resource Management that world leaders and members of Congress on both sides of the aisles have been phoning him for advice. A Russian oligarch whose name I've neglected to write down tweeted to Elon after he started blasting that he wanted to start a new political party because he doesn't like what's going on in the proposed budget. This oligarch reminded him that he has the satellites and that the structure was there to build this new policy. And he said, it's not who counts the votes, it's who writes the code. Put a pin in that one. All right, couple more things. Perfect playing out of Mercury opposing Pluto and trining Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn and Neptune, religious leaders, information, death threats, whatever. Iran has put a fatwa on Donald Trump. They put two. I thought it was just one.
Two ayatollahs, announced
okay.
it. So I suppose it's one
ayatollah.
fatwa, but two announced it. So
yeah. So the murder fatwa against him, also against Netanyahu, because they are threats to God, I forget, offenses to God. Anyway, uh, another slant of the Mercury Pluto opposition trining Saturn and Neptune. Um, Last week, SCOTUS issued an opinion that allowed parents to pull their kids out of a program if they were more religiously opposed to LGBTQ books. So, a group of parents who identify as Christian filed suit in North Dallas to challenge Texas's requirement that the Ten Commandments be put in every public classroom. And they're taking the logic of that case as grounds for free speech and parental control over their children's education. Also, in that, we last week, SCOTUS put nationwide injunctions in question in the birthright citizenship case, and Kavanaugh said in his concurring opinion, the way around it might be a class action. So within hours after that, the plaintiffs in the birthright case um, amended their suit to be a class action. We'll show
Mm-mm.
you. Few more bits of pushback back and forth. Sussman Godfrey, a Houston law firm, got an injunction against the executive order targeting it. And point of privilege here, I signed an amicus brief in support of this. I think maybe my last act as an attorney. The Department of Justice is appealing the uh, injunction that another law firm, Perkins Cole, got. I will point out that every law firm who has fought an EO has gotten a court order blocking the EO. A federal judge blocked RFK Jr. from dismantling healthcare agencies by cutting employees, reorganizing, consolidating, closing offices around the country. A court struck down Trump's order categorically denying entry to people trying to enter at the southern border to claim asylum. Now, this judge did pause his injunction for 2 weeks to give the DOJ time to appeal, and we know they will. And last night's big news, Kilmar Abrego Garcia amended his suit that he has against Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio, and a slew of heads of various divisions of DHS. He's already got a suit that has um, like 8 counts of constitutional and statutory violations, and he amended it to include damages for being tortured while he was in El Salvador, which means he will be giving testimony about what is going on in that prison.
And didn't he
Deep breath.
also ask to be detained?
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's not going out of prison because ICE says they're going to arrest him as soon as
Yeah.
he's been. The judge has said he can be out on bail, and his attorney said we'd rather let him stay there
Yeah.
because ICE said we'll go get him.
Which is really another unprecedented thing as I channel my Bernie. It's unprecedented. So, the aspects. Well, uh, we're just going to go a very short time ahead, and then we're going to talk about the news and what's emerging and things. And I'm going to share something about the Venus star point, but I'm going to go through the aspects first because they're quite stunning. Tomorrow is a huge day, supposedly a holiday, but oof, I don't know what's going to happen in Congress with this filibuster and everything and when they vote. But tomorrow we start the day with the moon, supposedly void, of course, but as we mentioned at the start, the old rules for a void, of course, moon mean that the moon makes no major aspects to any of the traditional planets, basically. We usually include Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune right now. But, I've questioned void for a while because there are some different definitions of it, but also the moon actually, as we head into tomorrow, is going to oppose table turn Eris in Aries and Chiron in Aries, most significantly, while all this stuff is going on in Congress. And I kind of think that's going to really turn tables. And maybe the moon is void and that's going to kind of shock the moon. Who knows? Anyway.
May I add something there before we go on?
Mm.
So, a void of course moon is when the moon is near, it has is moving through a sign and it's made its last major aspect and it just kind of hangs out traveling, not making any major aspects until it moves into the next sign. And the common interpretation of this is that this is a time period where stuff is likely to not play out the way you intend, or that things that happen during the void might unravel or need to be redone. So it's not historically a great time to push something through.
Mm.
And when I saw that that the moon was going to be void during I mean, all of July 3rd, void all by the traditional rules, all of July
Mm.
3rd. And then, so that would have a very high probability of if this bill is shoved through, A, it's not going to do what the intent is, and B, it may well have to be redone. And then Louise brought up, what if we include Eris and Chiron and the opposition to that, which will still be in place? And that's actually even worse. If this passes while that opposition is applying, while it's building, it has built into it absolute chaos.
And those oppositions are happening late this evening Eastern time. Opposition to Eris 8:49 p.m. and opposition to Chiron at 11:10 p.m. So whether you think void of course moon really is still a thing, there's been different interpretations throughout history. It's still rather a challenging time because it's only aspecting more newly discovered energies and things like that. So, and not the personal planets, right? So, okay. So then early tomorrow morning, because of my interest in the Venus star point, which I'll come back to in a minute, the moon gets to the very last degree of Libra early in the morning, 29 degrees Libra, and makes a quincunx to Venus in Taurus. The Libra and Taurus are both of Venus signs, and then makes a quincunx to Uranus. And a quincunx is an awkward aspect of adjustment. It usually shifts things. And the 29-degree mark is also a threshold, liminal, challenging degree of change. And Uranus is also the big change maker. This is huge, to be quite honest. And also the moon at 29 Libra is at the degree of one of the current 5-pointed Venus star points. I'll show you that in a minute. Anyway, right after that, the moon moves into Scorpio and is no longer officially void. But then Venus and Uranus conjunct, and they conjunct, fairly regularly, but this one is right at that anaretic last degree, 29 degrees, 52 minutes of Taurus. Tense, tense, tense. It's also called the weeping degree, or it's said to be one of the most challenging degrees of the zodiac because it's in the Pleiades, the 7 weeping sisters. I guess it's challenging depending from your perspective, but it's big, So anything happening at 29 degrees is challenging anyway. And then we have also tomorrow, the 4th, the Cancer Sun, 12 degrees 53 minutes, just about as the USA is having its solar return, squares Ceres, which I've just written the book on, in Aries. Challenging degree about, our needs are not being met, basically. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in more detail. Then Venus moves into Gemini at 11:30 a.m. So all this by 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And then Neptune stations retrograde exactly at 5:33 p.m. on the 4th at 2 degrees 10 minutes Aries, which is another Venus star point, but I'll come back to those in a minute. So that's all on the 4th. And outer planet stations retrograde are usually quite big, churny, kind of revelatory moments, right? So the whole retrograde period I don't really look at. It's just those real station points for the outer planets. Okay, switching to the 6th, while we're still kind of going, oh my God, what happened after July 4th? Venus, now in Gemini, will make an aspect of opportunity to Saturn in Aries, which is stationing retrograde on the 13th, and then Neptune in Aries, which is still at its station point. So Venus again is a big player this week. And then on to the 7th, Uranus moves into Gemini. Uranus will move finally into Gemini next year, but this is the first dip into Gemini after 7 years in Taurus. Uranus has an 84-year cycle, so most of us alive have not experienced Uranus in Gemini, right? So we'll be looking at some of that. Then right after that, on the 7th, Venus, still in Gemini, will trine Pluto. So Venus aspects all the big players, and we'll look more at that too. Then we're just going to jump right to July the 10th when we have a Capricorn full moon, which also activates another Venus star point. So I'll show you that image in a minute. And it's a big full moon. And it connects all of this, brings in Russia too, which we're going to talk about briefly. Then finally, July the 13th. We're only looking 9 days ahead. There's so much happening. Saturn will station retrograde at 1 degree 56 minutes of Aries, and both Saturn and Neptune will start to retread ground and move back into Pisces. But these are really powerful, potent tide turning points. Anything more just general about those aspects?
I would like to talk about the journey that Venus is going through this week, because it's going to change the atmosphere. It's going to change the social vibe. I call Venus the social director of the sky. So she's like how we get along, how we deal with each other, also represents what we value. So it starts with this massive, explosive shock, surprise, wrapping up Uranus's time in Taurus, in a sense, since 2018. And then Venus immediately moves into this much lighter mode. Venus in Gemini is, I call it pal territory. It's going around in gangs, but it's starting to open to get people talking, and she immediately contacts Saturn and Neptune. And since Neptune moved into Aries at the end of March, every time a body has moved into every time a body has had an easy contact with Saturn and Neptune, a really inspirational figure has come forward and said a whole lot. So this could be many, many inspirational figures catching fire and spreading a message which very quickly becomes really deep. Venus in Gemini is like flitting around, but with that contact to Pluto immediately, we get very, very intense and serious and focused. This could be survival stuff. One through line here is something really shocking happening that's going to affect the economy. People talking a whole lot, waking up, and then wham, we're going to do something about it. And echoing that is on the 4th, when this all starts to blow open, the moon in Scorpio makes a really hard aspect to Pluto in Aquarius. The moon in the sky at any given moment is the people, Pluto in Aquarius. I think we've had our let them eat cake moment that's going to galvanize a lot of people. And this isn't even talking about the role that Uranus is going to play in the
Oh my
mix.
goodness, I know.
But there's a story here of people seeing options, people coming alive, and a general atmospheric eruption that happens as a result. And it's fascinating that the Venus star points are so active. So do you want to
I will
bring that in?
get that image up. Just bear with me a second. I've got so many bits I want to talk about today, but
So while she's doing that, I'm going to also mention that all the big action this week does involve a feminine influence. Venus is doing all kinds of things, and then the moon is historically thought of as a feminine influence, and it's in its daddy mode with
yeah.
Saturn being there. So we're going to get real. We will
Mm,
see real physical consequences. How well are we provided for? And if we add that square to series into it, the whole thing is, wait a minute, who are we? What is it? What do we have? Don't you
mm.
dare.
hmm And I'm gonna actually, because I've worked deeply with Venus, as you know, Kathy. I'm certified in the Venus Star Point work. I've done these Venus retrograde classes for years, and I'm going to say Venus is the feminine, but it's that kind of feminine energy of the othered people. And I'm going to include people like Hakeem Jeffries, who's doing a marvelous filibuster right now on the floor of the House. It's LBGTQ. It's people who have been othered all the time. I see Venus show up very often with those as well, because it's about our values as well, so, and
Hmm.
our relationships. So anyway, I'm not going to spend ages on this because the book on the Venus star point is huge, and but I just want to point some things out. Venus has a five-pointed star active all the time. Well, it has two, made of the direct Sun Venus conjunctions and the retrograde Sun Venus conjunctions, and they slowly move in reverse in the background, a little bit like the moon's nodes. And they really, Ariel Gutman, who wrote the book about it, says it's like this invisible clock moving kind of slowly in the background. And the Venus star points, when they're activated, usually are connected with big points of change. So, right now, we're under this 2 Aries star point from March the 22nd, when Venus was retrograde. Neptune stationing retrograde on that point. So something is going to be activated, harking back to March the 22nd. Then we had we had another retrograde star point, January the 8th, 2022, 18 degrees Capricorn. The full moon is at 18 degrees Capricorn. Then I started the aspects by mentioning this aspect of adjustment, the quincunx between 29 Libra and 29 Taurus. This is 29 Libra, October the 22nd, 2022. By the way, the Russian invasion of Ukraine started under this star point. But this is even bigger because the star points move slowly backwards through the signs. This was the first Libra star point for well over 100 years. And the star is slowly moving back into Venus ruled signs. This one will move back into Pisces, where Venus is exalted. Anyway, that's hopefully I've kind of explained it as briefly as I can. But the major point is that having 3 of the 5 star points so activated in such a short period of time is really going to hark back to those periods of time, right? Okay. Interestingly, I did just notice that Hygeia is also activating this star point on the full moon. So, there's more, but we're not looking at Hygeia today. So I just don't get too tied up in the details, everybody. Just kind of make a note of these dates, and I'm going to dive straight into quickly talking about Russia, if that's all right. Or do you want to say something, Kat?
Oh, what I wanted to say is with what the star points are doing
Mm.
is tying July 4th to 3 different times we've already lived through, two in 2022 and one this last March, right? Is that when that one was?
Yeah. Mhm.
And then also no, July 4th to 2, three, one of them which is when that quincunx took is
Mhm.
I'm sorry, could you put the chart back up?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It'll make it easier for me
So
to say this.
July the 4th is directly relating back to March 22nd and October 20th of this year, and October the 22nd, 2022. The full
Right,
moon
right.
is, which we are feeling already, I think, is directly going to activate this January the 8th, 2022 one. And when Venus star points are retrograde, so they've got an R there, that means Venus becomes the morning star, which is more warrior-like and often related to wars. And Russia invaded Ukraine right as Venus was rising after that one. So is
Right.
that clearer?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to
Mm,
make it clear that there are a couple of things on the 4th that tie to
mm,
this March and to October of 2022, and then the
mm,
Capricorn full moon ties to January of
mm.
2022.
And in a nutshell, it's kind of like things are going to be back in the news or reaching some kind of shift of change. And I think we're just going to spend a little time on Russia. So I follow an interesting guy on YouTube called Colin Robinson. I think that's how we say his name, even though you spell his name Caolan. He lives in Ukraine. He does reports on Ukraine. And he reported that Putin, for the first time, personally recognized the problems in the Russian economy. Venus is money, by the way. So, anyway, Putin said that Russia's defense spending is 13.5 trillion rubles, which is $172 billion. He said that's a lot. We paid for it with inflation, but we are now fighting this inflation. It's reported that the spending figures are probably grossly understated and that the situation with the Russian economy has really deteriorated. There's stories of them cutting loaves of bread in half because they haven't got enough bread or loaves of bread for people to buy. All kinds of stories like that. And Kathy will go more into this, but I related that to this full moon coming up on that Venus star point that launched kind of the invasion, but also historically, Saturn Neptune conjunctions have been bad for Russia. And even though the conjunction isn't exact till next year, they're so close together. They are moving together. So, Kathy, you can tell more about that.
Saturn and Neptune have come to get, well, first off, they're going to have what I call a flyby.
Mm,
On the 17th, they're going to be conjunct by degree, but not by minute, and it's teeing up something that'll be exact at the end of February.
mhm,
Throughout Saturn and Neptune being close together, their conjunction has coincided with huge shifts in the allocation of power in Russia. The Russian Revolution happened with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Stalin died on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Putin was born on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. The Berlin Wall fell on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Not exactly Russia, but at the same time, Russia lost a huge number of its member states, and like a year or two later, it dissolved. It just collapsed and then became the Russian Federation.
mhm,
So, also, St. Petersburg was founded on a Saturn Neptune conjunction. It's now called Leningrad, and that's where Putin was born.
mhm,
So, this particular traveling together is really big
mhm,
for things happening in Russia. And this month, once Uranus moves into Gemini, it's going to be in a sextile or a door opening, a window opening, an opportunity aspect with both Saturn and Neptune does not bode well for the current leadership of that country or the structure of the country. So it would fit for things to be happening now that might take a while to play out. The Capricorn full moon also has the energy of an emotional break for something, and it might take a little while to actually clear out the circumstances and read into that everything you want to read, okay? A
mhm,
break in a governmental system
mhm,
that takes a while to get replaced. And
mhm,
Russia is directly involved in this. Also, Russia and Ukraine, the boundaries and who does what and who owns what,
mhm.
also has been going back and forth. It's a through line
Yeah.
uh, in the Saturn Neptune conjunctions. And if you want to know more about this, I have a talk about it at my site. There we go.
But combining this flyby, as Kathy called it, of Saturn and Neptune with this full moon on that Venus star point that kind of launched the invasion, if you like, or he chose to launch it under that. But it's not looking good for Russia really at the minute.
No.
There's going to be changes. Who knows what will happen? So I think that's all I want to say about Russia. But that guy's really interesting. If anybody wants to follow him on YouTube, he's kind of cute too. But he's got a husband.
Well, I'll throw one other thing into it, and that is if the birth time, date and time that we've been given for Putin is correct, and who knows, with him with his spy training, the date could be completely wrong. But if it is correct, he has a very, very early degree Gemini moon. So when Uranus changes signs, it's going to start really shaking things up for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not going to look at the Russian Federation charts and Putin today. We
No,
want to
no,
give
no.
you the bigger picture because there's so much going on. So where are we going next? The big beautiful
Let's look.
bill or the yeah, or big
Oh,
ugly bill as Jeffries is
well,
calling.
do we want to say more about it than what we have
Okay,
with? I mean, we could, or we could just look at the
we look at the
full moon
full moon
chart.
chart. Yeah. Okay, the full moon chart. I'm just going to share my software. So the full moon is on July the 10th at 18 degrees Capricorn and with opposing the sun at 18 degrees Cancer. It is actually aspecting the nodes and a few other things. But all these other things are happening along the way. So all those aspects we mentioned, you can see that Uranus is just moved into Gemini. Venus is trotting along so fast right now. We've got 6 Gemini, but she will have aspected Neptune and Saturn. Neptune has moved 1 minute retrograde. Saturn is about to turn retrograde 3 days after this. This is a huge point of change, this full moon, even though it's not making very tight major aspects because all these other things are happening around it. It's pretty huge.
And Saturn rules the, well, Saturn is in charge of the party. Okay. Saturn is
Mm,
the planet that's associated with the sign of Capricorn.
mhm,
And it's in the sign associated with Mars, and Mars is in a conversation with the moon. Um, yeah.
mm, yeah.
Oh, and okay, so the fact that we've got Neptune retrograde and Saturn is in its retrograde station, it will actually station retrograde a couple of days later.
Hmm.
That is starting, the fire is starting to go backward, and we're going to be feeling and retracing what's been happening
Mm,
since these two planets entered the sign of Aries. Now, they are going to actually go back into Pisces, but for now, let's just focus on the fact that Neptune is going to very slowly be going back over the territory it's been in since the
mhm,
end of March, and Saturn will slightly more quickly be going over the territory that it's been in since May 24th. And
mm,
Saturn will do that until September 1. So we've got the rest of the summer in the US with that going on. And as Saturn's doing that, it and Neptune are both in opportunity aspects to Uranus, which will become exact as the month goes on.
And
So
I'm gonna
that's where the change is. That's where the change possibility is. You
mm,
usually look at a full moon as a time of release,
mhm.
and the moon itself isn't what's causing the release.
No.
It's the other planets.
Yeah. But this is I've drawn the lines on because also what else is happening as Uranus moves into Gemini just before the full moon is that this mini grand trine, which is going to be active, it's called a mini grand trine, is going to be active for quite some time. It's going to separate a little bit again as Neptune and Saturn move back into Pisces briefly, and Uranus will then briefly move back into Taurus, but really because they're big heavy hitter planets, all four, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto, they are speaking to each other. And if anybody watches like any astrologer worth their salt on YouTube at the moment, everybody's saying we've never been here before, where all of these outer planets change signs. So this is another big indicator of big change because especially with Neptune and Saturn going retrograde and Uranus going forward, they are going to really speak to each other. So, aspect of opportunity, big change, shocks, revelations. I'm going to say, yeah,
And
people
here's what
starting to see clearly.
another thing that might be leading to that. So
Mm.
that little guy next to the north node that looks like a pillbox with an N
Mhm.
coming off of it, that is,
Nessus.
and that represents.
That is, Nessus generally reveals abuses of power, and the phrase that Melanie Reinhardt uses for Centaur Nessus is the buck stops here. It's like we've had enough. We can't do this anymore. And Nessus has just met the North Node, which is kind of our potential, where we're what we're moving towards. As Kathy said, about we're having our let them eat cake moment. People are just waking up and going, "Oh my God!" This, like, globally, like Russia, here, everywhere. We've had enough.
Well,
These oligarchs are kind of like, yeah. Anyway.
what is catching my eye about that is if you look at a chart, like if you were going to pick a time to do something, you look at what aspects are building. And in
Mm,
this chart, look at Mars in Virgo up there in the 10th. I see Mars in Virgo as the toolkit, the fix it gene. It's like, I say measure 5 times, cut once. I mean, this is very,
mhm,
very hands-on. What can we do to fix things? Energy. And Mars is moving into an opposition with Nessus. Mars in the 10th. So
mhm.
real granular work, attacks, well, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
uh, bearing down on that corruption. And let me see when Mars is going to hit, when it's going to get to 21. But if I use my glasses,
Mm,
around the 23rd or 24th. So
mm,
right around the Leo new moon, which is on the 24th. So 2 weeks after this, Mars will be opposite at Nessus, which says to me, between this time, July 10 and July 24, we're
mm.
going to have a building amount of detail coming out very publicly about corruption.
And Mars, of course, will also meet the South Node, and just before that, and that's also kind of a time of change as well. And I agree with you about Mars in Virgo kind of being that detail and the toolbox, but it's also taking action, kind of
Mhm.
meaningful, useful action, doing the right thing. It feels like, I would say.
Well, and as Mars moves in the US chart, it's moving through the ninth house of legislation, of international relations,
Mm,
of racism, of ideology, of the education system, and immigration. When it makes that exact opposition to Nessus, it's going to be sitting on the US Neptune,
mm,
sitting on
it
it.
is.
So we're dealing with a lot of stuff this month.
Cool. And I just have to give a shout out for my numbers because I love
Please do.
degrees and I love numbers. Mars is at 13 degrees, Mercury's at 13 degrees, Ceres is at 13 degrees. So these so-called minor aspects, Mars is making a quincunx, which is that aspect of adjustment to Ceres in Aries, and 13 is the number of the goddess or the witch, whatever you want to call it. Unlucky 13. But also look at these speaking to each other. Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, Mars is the ruler of Aries.
Mhm.
Ceres is also kind of related to Virgo in many ways. And so, more change. This is adjustments. People going, no, this is not working for us. We have to be the change we want to see or whatever in the world. So, and speak out, I think. So, hmm so with Venus being kind of that feminine energy, so is the 13, I think. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, but I just think people have had enough. The people.
So something really very possibly big developments on the 4th, whether we know about them or not, different, who
Mm,
knows. But by Monday the 7th,
mm.
I hear people Bryson singing "It's a Whole New World." So
But also, we may not see the developments on the fourth, but Uranus has that shock value, right? Shock and kind of, I always describe it that Uranus can feel like being hit round the head with a 4x4, kind of wake up kind of thing. And maybe people will be so shocked by what's coming out everywhere that it's how they rise up. So, yeah. Hmm.
I don't care if Congress is going on hiatus. Lots is going to be going on.
If Jeffries ever sits down, I think he's still going. I'm sure he's not going to last the full. Maybe, who knows? How long can he keep going? Because that's the only thing that stops the vote going ahead, right? They were only given 15 minutes to debate the big ugly bloated thing bill, so he's filibustering. Anyway, watch this space. Have a happy 4th of July. Honestly, though, I don't know about you, Cassie, but with Venus conjunct Uranus on that day, I would be going to a drone fireworks show or staying home personally. I won't be going anywhere. I'll be wearing my, in honor of the death cult. But so stay safe, look after you and yours, find some fun, have some joy. Um, are there protest plans? I don't know. I've been
Oh
so
yeah,
angry.
there are. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Be safe, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.